Hi there. We'd like to welcome you to the virtual kitchen table. We are Erin from Everlearning, Haley from Taking a Kinder Path, and myself, Ashley from Ashley as Mama and Storytime Shelves. We're gathering to have conversations about family life and home education, most specifically unschooling, which is sometimes known as self-directed education, or as I often refer to it, consent-based learning. We'll be sharing experiences and ideas, learning as we go. We hope you'll pull a chair up to the table and join us. Welcome to the virtual kitchen table. I am Ashley and I'm here today with Erin. Hi, Erin.
Hi, Ashley.
How are you?
I'm pretty good. My voice is not quite back, but it's getting there. So, yeah.
Good. I'm glad. It sounds good. Um, okay, so today, um, I'm just going to explain a little bit about where we kind of came up with this idea and how it kind of popped into my head, really. And I thought, this would be a really good one to have a conversation around. And it was kind of coming up for me recently because of something I saw, but it's certainly something I've thought about before in the past too. It's kind of around this idea of how parents can feel pressure to kind of like teach all of the things to our kids or pass on knowledge to our kids about certain things, before they turn 18 or before they move out, whatever, you know, the deadline. There's no deadline. But so what made me think of it recently was an Instagram post. And I'd seen ones before, and it just happened. It wasn't anyone I followed. It just popped up in my feed. And it was something along the lines of, top 5 or top 10 things to teach your kid before they turn 18 or before they move out or before they start college or something like that. And I don't actually think I even read it all the way through, but it was things like, and Erin, you can help me because we talked about examples, but because this could be like academic things, but also non-academic things, right? So like teaching car maintenance or making sure your kid knows how to do laundry before they move out or how to call and make a dentist appointment, like all these like really helpful things to know how to do. Um, but when I saw that post, I just thought, okay, yeah, sure. All of that's great. If we can share, if we can help our kids out in those ways and those learn those things, that's not bad. But I just started thinking how I don't want to have a long checklist, I guess, of things that I have to make sure I cover, all the bases with both my kids before they reach a certain age, before they reach adulthood. Um, because well, one, I just don't think it works that way, which is what we're going to talk about today. But I just thought, oh gosh, like there's another thing that parents are really going to worry about and stress over. And I thought, well, I don't really think that's necessary. But and Aaron, we were just talking about this, like as parents, we kind of get these messages or things pop up in our faces almost a lot online, especially. And even, I was saying like even when we know better, it can still have an impact on us and we can start to feel ourselves going, oh my gosh, like, okay, I really got to show my kid how to do the laundry, or I got to make sure. And you can kind of get caught up in it, even when you don't really mean to, or at least that was my experience recently. And Aaron, I know you're going to share too. Thankfully, you already have a couple blog posts on this that's relevant. And we'll make sure we put those in the show notes. But I think the title I got, Aaron, is A Lifetime for Learning. Parents don't need to offer everything. And that's the one that I read through before today, which was very much in line with what I was thinking for this and was really helpful. But then the other one is reflecting on the process of self-directed learning. That's also relevant to what we're talking about today. So we'll link those and refer to those. Um, but yeah, I think it would just be helpful to have this conversation. I know it'll help me, but for other people too who might just feel, uh, it can. And I wonder too if like home educating parents or unschooling parents might feel a little bit more pressure because you can start to feel like it's all on you. And that's what your blog post is kind of about, actually, too, right? Like it's as the parent, we don't have to be the ones who offer everything and who cover all the bases. And for lots of like more than one reason. It's not just because we know that they'll continue learning their whole life, just like we do. But I really loved in your one blog post how there's like a nice opportunity if we do leave some gaps and we let them explore and learn these things more on their own or when it matters the most or something. So yeah, Erin, does that kind of explain what we're getting into today?
Yeah, I think so, Ashley. And I feel like, I mean, it was this, I think, a really good idea that you had to talk about this because I see it too. You kind of like, I wonder if some of it is the kind of the rise of like, I don't know, I think people used to just, have kids. And now even by the time my kids were being born and probably before that, but I just wasn't in those circles yet, there were all these parenting magazines. And so those articles tend to, it's kind of like 5 things. I mean, even as young as little kids and like school readiness, like it's everywhere, right? I was thinking about this the other day. I was coming out of a public library, big shock. And on the like kind of like a little bulletin board or whatever on the way out, they were advertising, like, I think it was like a rhyme and story, like, or a song and rhymes. I can't remember exactly, but, and I'd been to this one before, and it's such a great program on its own. But then on the bottom in like bold, it was like perfect for school readiness skills. And I'm like, oh, that's just so weird. It's such a great program anyway. And so I feel like every time we see that, we kind of go, oh, we were there. What were those readiness skills? Were we maybe I should have been picking them up and then reinforcing them on the way home. So yeah. And then just, a lot of magazine articles it catches the eye, right? It's kind of like, 5 steps to this, 10 things your teen needs to know before they leave home or whatever. And I think, especially maybe, I don't know what account it was, Ashley, or you're maybe just talking about like different kind of seeing lots of different things. I think there's so much now kind of like this clickbait idea. And I don't know, there's so much of it now within homeschooling, where people are kind of setting up their own platforms and businesses. And I think it's a way to catch people's eye, right? And so I think we just have to remember that there's reasons that people give these messages, and they don't necessarily have to do that much with our particular kid or the way that we kind of go about things. But I can definitely see your point about how it adds pressure. And the article that I had written that came to mind when you mentioned this was, so I think this is good, because then the second article I found is more in line, I think, with what you're talking about. So maybe we can almost like divide we can talk about both. But the article that came to my mind, the blog post I'd written, was more like experience. I wouldn't say so much just skills, but more like do we offer our kids travel? Do we buy them, a particular book or science equipment or whatever? And we can dig into this a little bit more, as we go on. But the idea that I've seen my kids pursue their own interests in things that maybe I hadn't thought about, or maybe we didn't have the capacity in one way or another to do at that time. But like, just because you don't offer your kids loads of travel doesn't mean that they're not going to get to travel. Or, maybe you don't have a certain piece of equipment in your home. It doesn't mean they can't get that or access that. So maybe we can kind of dive more into that. I wonder if a better place to just start is with where your original thoughts were, is around these skills. Like some of these, as you said, like, does your kid understand budgeting? Do they know how to do car maintenance? And I just think like kids learn things so differently. So sure, there might be some kids where you decide, today's the day that I'm going to teach my child how to, I don't know what, make jam or do preserve,
Yeah.
like that. And for some kids, that very direct instruction, um, it might be just the thing, and the timing might just be right. But I think more often than that, it's just getting invited to be part of that in like natural ways over time versus this is something I have to teach my kid. And first of all, not everybody knows how to preserve. Not everybody's interested in that. And if they become interested in it, they don't necessarily need to do that by a certain age. And I think even when you look at something that maybe seems a little bit more crucial, like budgeting, even that, like budgeting is so much more like, just as I've kind of watched, I guess not only my own kids, but I learn a little bit about what some of the other people their age, kind of how they think about things as well. Budgeting is so much more about, I think, developing your value system and developing a certain amount of maturity, a certain understanding. But budgeting has a lot to do with the specific situation you're in. So, deciding that, okay, they're 14, we're going to teach them all these things. I'm not saying that it hurts to give some information, but the idea that they are then going to be able to, like you sit down with them for a period of time, maybe in an afternoon, and then that's it. They're going to be great budgeters as adults. There's so much more at play with budgeting. And it has so much to do with habits, personality, maturity, the set of circumstances. Like people need to budget at completely different levels depending on their lifestyle. So I think it goes back to that very kind of schooly idea of, school is about preparing so that kids can live. And I think when we're talking about more of like self-directed learning, whole life learning, it really is more you're gaining experience as you need it. Yes, it's nice to have some things prior that you can pull back from. But this idea that we have this list of skills and we have to kind of check them off and our kid is going to acquire them because we set aside Saturday afternoon to teach it, I think it just simplifies it so much more than is the actual like reality. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I have so many thoughts. Yeah, all of that. And I think what, just as you were talking there, what I was really thinking about is how, one, yes, like we all learn differently. So that alone, right, is, I have a kid and there's a lot of kids who push back with the whole, this is what we're learning this Saturday afternoon. Like that right there, not happening. And when, as a parent, when you feel pressure, like, oh, you feel like they need to learn this thing, and you think, well, if I don't do it now, what if we forget about it? Or what if it's harder to come back to? Or if we do it now, we can move on to other, like, it just creates a lot of pressure. And a lot of kids really are not receptive to that, which is pretty understandable. So I think a lot of times those are, it kind of sounds like good things to do for your kids. But I think really it can make the parents feel more comfortable if they feel like, okay, covered this, did this, I did my job, and they can breathe a sigh of relief. But even if you sit down and so we'll stick with the budgeting example, even if you sit down and kind of go over the basics of budgeting, or, you cover that a little bit, there's no way that you can, like, it's an ongoing thing is what I'm trying to get at, right? And it would be true for so many. There's some things, sure, you could show the kid how to do something once and then they're not going to forget it. But for the most part, with things like this that really matter, you can't just really cover it quickly. Like it's something and that's why I like what you were saying, how learning it through living life as it comes up naturally, because it does. And if it doesn't, then we can kind of come back to how important is it really anyway. But yeah, and you're right, it is very like clickbait, right? And it's like, trying to get people to come over to whatever, read more information about what you've written about and stuff. But I think on the surface, it can really appear to be like, you know, here's kind of like, here's what a good parent would do. And it's cover these things. And I think I just spend a lot of time thinking about how parents just care so much about their kids and they want to do all these things. They want to feel like they're doing a good job as, you know, in their role as mom or dad. And this almost like what you said simplifies it. And realistically, I don't think that that's how things work for the most part. And again, like sometimes these things do maybe haven't popped up, and I think you had said earlier, or maybe it was before we were recording, but sometimes there's kids who want this stuff and but those are the kids I think often that will let you know, right? Like those are the kids that are coming to you and kind of asking for it. But I
Yeah.
think a lot of times, like again, just sticking with the budgeting example, that's going to matter. I mean, there's different ways you can do it, but I'm thinking if you know you're a teenager, you could even do it before that. Like it comes up for kids in different ways because they start having money. I'm thinking when they have, you know, their first part-time job or something. And yeah, I think it's like a lot of conversations and a lot of like little pieces that all kind of come together eventually of all the different times that you know, around budgeting, right? You've kind of talked about budgeting or you've helped them with their money or something. And because everyone's learning different, everyone's family's different, it's just not as simple as like checking it off the list. So I was kind of maybe sensitive to seeing that post because I thought, I don't like seeing things that pop up that might just create more stress, pressure, or fear, or more, you know, something else for parents to worry about. Um, Not that everybody would feel that way coming across that, but I thought that might be a way for someone to quickly go, oh my gosh, like I haven't even thought about covering that yet. And
What
then
now?
yeah, right. Like add that to the list of things I have to make sure I cover. And I just, yeah, I think that could be done a little bit differently, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and it makes me think about something like budgeting. It's not, you know, when we're talking about, well, let's set aside some time on a Saturday afternoon, or it might be maybe they buy like a family budgeting course or something, you know, like that. So maybe it's not just
Yeah.
one afternoon. I know was it two of my kids or just one? I can't remember. It might have just been one. They took like like a finance course in high school. Not in high school, but like a group of people in our homeschool group got together and did like purchased a program and invited us. And it was just one of my kids actually. So yeah, so they really wanted to do that course and got a lot out of that course. And it's funny. I was just actually we were just talking about it the other day and how much they did take away from that, and they have kind of these little principles. But I don't know that all the kids took the same amount. I could tell even at that time that it was really making sense to him. Like it was something that he was interested in the moment. And well, and he chose to take it, whereas my other kids chose not to do it. So it makes sense that it was like he was like, oh yeah, this sounds interesting, and he took a lot of it in. But we also, it's the timing of this is funny. We had a whole conversation about how even though some of those kind of facts were interesting to him, that so much more of it has had to do with just living life and living life with not only his own decisions he's maybe made as far as like what to spend, what to save, but just those little things over the years where well, he used the example of being at the grocery store and how he remembers often they would each be able to like, there would be something they would want and they would each choose something. Maybe they would each like choose a type of cracker or a type of cookie or something like that. And so he remembers that grocery shopping being like something we did together, something that was like relatively joyful and fun. It was like, okay, you guys go get this, I'll go to this section. And that idea of, because that's part of, I think we think of budgeting, we think of just sticking, like not spending money, right?
Yeah.
Budgeting also involves what are the things you need and like. I mean, that's the point of it. You need to be able to
Yeah.
purchase some things, whatever. So he was just talking about kind of that balance between having those moments of like feeling abundant and
Yeah.
like grocery day, right? I remember that
Yeah.
as a kid too. My dad used to grocery shop and it was like Thursday nights. And I remember like Thursday nights, the groceries coming in. And so that feeling of abundance. And then other times, which happened frequently too, seeing something on the shelf and me saying, you know what, we could get like two of those for the price of that. Like just not in
Hmm.
a punitive way, but just over time. And it wasn't like I was standing in the aisle going, okay, now I'm going to teach them, impulse control, or
Yeah.
teach them, the price per gram or whatever. It wasn't like that. It was just that is part of life. A parent looks at a price and they're like, let's just think about it. How badly do you want it? That's just part of life. And so I think that to size it down to this like skill to teach, it goes so much hand in hand with all the other things when we talk about like self-directed learning and unschooling, that we're just picking up these messages all the time. And we talked about even just at like a family level, the family, I guess the family culture or the family values that our kids pick up over time around, like he knows kids who never could choose something they wanted at the grocery store, but he also knows kids who it was like there was no limits at all on what they could. And maybe in fairness, both of those people, it's funny, we talked about this too, that both of the examples he was giving totally made sense to me within the context of those families.
Right.
Like the one family literally couldn't just have their kids getting things. They had to stick really tight. The other family had a super abundance of money. So I said to him, like, it's hard to say no when you don't need to say no. And like, that's a conversation too, right? I mean, I know some people don't need to say no, but they choose to in
Yeah.
order to kind of whatever. Like we can talk, that's an interesting conversation. But it was just like interesting to hear from him kind of like, yeah, I learned this in this course and these things have stuck with me. But I think more than that was just those experiences, because what they allowed him to do was, and then he would pay attention to his reaction to that,
Hmm.
right? Like maybe there were times he didn't feel that was fair, that, whatever. But those things just kind of accumulate for each person, each individual in a family, I think, that kind of informs the way that they want to. Like and sorry, I'll stop after this, but I know people who felt a lot of unfairness about not being able to get things. And as adults, there's a sense of like, I'm an adult now and I'm buying what I want. So
Yeah.
if their parents had tried to budget with them, that's not looking anything like what they've decided to do as an adult, because they aren't in agreement with their parents' values around money.
Hmm.
So when we try to directly teach our kids something like that, we're assuming that we have the information and now we pass it on. But
Hmm.
something like budgeting, there's so much more to it.
So much.
Yeah.
And it's so situational because it's just different situations
Mm-hmm.
too. So the situation our kids are growing up in might look quite different from the situation that they're in as adults. So, and I mean, we take all those experiences with us, and then, it's not to say that that's not helpful, even if it looks different later on. But yeah, to me, it's just like relevance keeps coming up for me, like as you were talking, like, and I think like we've talked about before with home educating and unschooling, because we do so much together. Like grocery shopping is such a great example. Our kids come grocery shopping with us all the time. And there'd be lots of things that they see us do because, no, we're not leaving them at home by themselves. They're coming with us to the bank or the post office or wherever. And kids are curious, so they ask questions. Like they're very much involved. They're not just silently there, they're part of it. And it's definitely not, I don't know, from my experience, it would look nothing like a lesson that you would get in school. It's very much like through conversation and just practical in the moment decisions that you're making, and kind of almost like talking out loud. Like I'm making all the decisions or thinking my things when I'm grocery shopping that I would be doing in my head if I was by myself. But when the kids are there, and not always, but like they're just part of it, right? Like we're doing it together. And I think that's the other thing. I keep going back to it because that, that Instagram post that kind of sparked this, where it's like, the list of things to teach them to do kind of removes it from context, right? Like it's almost like teach them this even if it's not relevant right now because it'll help them later. And I know I sound super critical about these posts. So if anyone has a post like that, it's okay. I'm sure they're helpful in ways for sure. This is just how it came across to me in the moment. And I honestly I don't even know whose post it was. But it just kind of, yeah, it removes the relevance. And then, like I was thinking the other example of, like, yes, if I want my kids to learn how to do laundry, and they've done that's the other thing. They've done laundry with me before when they were young, and when they're really little and they're still into doing those things and they like helping with the laundry. But it's been, I think for both of them, and for laundry specifically, it'd be safe to say it's been years since they'll fold and put away clothes. I'm not saying they're not involved in the process at all, but if I were to say, hey, could you go throw in a load of laundry? They'd be like, how do I do that? And I could say, okay, I'll show you. And I don't think there'd be anything wrong with this. And I'm not saying I will never do this, but I could say, okay, let's go down and let's do it, and I'll show you, and then you know how to do laundry. But again, if they don't continue to do it, I mean, laundry's not complicated, so maybe they would remember this time, but maybe not, right? Like, I think sometimes we teach the kids something and we think, okay, you know how to do that. But if they don't have the opportunity to continually do it, like any of us, they're going to forget and have to relearn when they go back to it. And I think about, I just think about myself and what my experience was like. I know because I moved out, I went off to university. How old was I? Like 19. Um, I can still think back to like a whole bunch of things that I did for the first time once I moved out. And I guess I probably figured some things out with friends and roommates and stuff, but a lot of stuff, laundry is a good example, I think. And there'd be a lot of other examples where it's not that complicated. And you could even make some mistakes with laundry, but then you just learn from those mistakes and you figure it out. So and I know that's just one example, but and I think it's helpful though to think about some of the more simple examples, because I just trust that if, for some reason I just continue on with the laundry. I like doing laundry. So that's realistic that I just kind of continue doing laundry in our family. And, all of a sudden my kids are getting ready to move out and mom's been doing the laundry. I think they'll be okay. Like, I think they'll figure it out when they're not living here anymore and they have to do their own laundry. And, maybe some mistakes will be made, but so I can just take the pressure off. Like, I'm just not even going to, and again, that's just one example, but I just found that was a bit helpful thinking about my own experience of the things that, I mean, sure, like I learned a lot and I had some chores and I did, different things with both my parents growing up, but it's not like I learned everything before I moved out. When we're talking about those, like, I mean, it's true for academic stuff too, of course, but I feel like it's a little bit different because some parents who might be of the mindset like, well, you'll continue on with your schooling, right? But there's like that pressure around like, well, who's going to show you how to do the like practical, the things we're talking about, car maintenance, how to make a doctor's appointment and stuff. Yeah. What else did I want to say about that? I think that was pretty much it. But just to make sure I was clear about the relevance piece, and I'll stick with the laundry example for now. I think if you're going to make the decision, okay, it's really important to me that my kids know how to do laundry, and insert any other example. That's great. But I think it's just to keep in mind, like, if they're going to have to incorporate that into what made me think about this really was like your kids probably grocery shopped with you so many times over the years. It wasn't like one time they came with you, or for a short period of time they came grocery shopping with you, and they were really able to, well, one, learn how to grocery shop, but to all the budgeting pieces that you shared around that. Like it's an ongoing thing. And I think a lot of times with these like checklist type things, it's like, oh, well, you just show them that once and they know it, like laundry or whatever. And like any of us, like you'll forget, right? Like simple things you won't, but some things like it has to stay relevant to the kids, and it's not going to stay relevant if it's not something that they're going to have an opportunity to continue to do, I guess is my point. So it's like, don't stress about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think the idea of being shown something once, like I remember my dad deciding, and it came from such a good place, and
Mm-hmm.
it not for some people, but I literally remember like a Sunday afternoon, he was going to teach me how to change a car tire. I think it was probably right before I got my license. So it was
Yeah.
probably 15 or 16, right? And so I changed the tire. I think he did it. And then I tried, I can't remember what the process was, but it wasn't very long. Because I mean, you're not going to keep taking tires off cars. There's not that.
Yeah.
If you're not in a mechanic shop, you're probably not going to get that many goes at it. Like,
No.
so yeah, so he showed me and I did at least some of the process of it. And I appreciated that thought that he had of like, oh, I was about to be driving a car. It would be good if I knew how to change a tire. The reality is I didn't remember at that time. I mean, as I got older and I had my own car and I was traveling more distances, I did become, I had a car. I remember my first car, there was always a struggle somehow with the oil levels. So I got really
Mm-hmm.
checked my oil. But again, I have probably never checked the oil in the car I have now because it's not an issue. And
Yeah.
my brother-in-law is a mechanic and I go there regularly, so I just don't. But for years, I was very diligent about checking my oil. But we don't do things for the sake of doing things like that. We do things if we need to do things, right?
Yeah.
And so I think like even the grocery shopping is an interesting thing because yes, my kids definitely got lots of experience grocery shopping, but I didn't teach them like they do things differently. So for example, if I was to go to a store with my daughter, she's so methodical about the way that things are packed in the cart. So as the cashier is passing them to us, I'm like putting them in the cart, she's redoing the cart, right? So she didn't learn that from me.
Mm-hmm.
She's much better at spatial. She just notices it. I couldn't care less. It's coming back out again. It doesn't matter to me, right? But for her,
Yeah.
it's just aesthetically better to have it. And she would argue that it's important because we have different priorities, right? So for her, she just does that really differently. But
I
that's not
relate to your daughter here.
right. So that's not, and my husband is the same. They have the same brain that way. Like things are very systematically placed. And but I didn't teach her how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Not at all. Not at all. That's just her. And that's kind of the way she does things. So I think that even if we think we're teaching our child something, and I think that's the interesting thing to me about now having kids in their 20s, there's so many things that they do differently
Mm-hmm.
than I did. And there's so many things that I didn't teach them because I didn't know how to do them.
Yeah.
That's the other thing is we're not all good at all things.
Yeah.
So there's a whole bunch of stuff I don't know how to do. But and I think here's a piece about like independence versus interdependence, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if I was taking my kids on a camping trip by myself, which I used to do,
Mm-hmm.
I would want to review some, like I would be thinking, okay, have I put this tent up before? So I've had situations I don't need to just wing it in life. Like if I'm going to be there with some minors, I want to be able to get a tent up. So if we have a new tent, I'm going to try that first just to see, does it all work? Do I understand how to assemble it? Is there a piece missing? Any of that kind of stuff. So I don't think we're saying like not to prepare, but it's just like, and I'm going to do those kinds of things, right? I'm going to make sure that just things are working. I'm going to make sure my car's working well before we leave. I'm going to make sure I've packed things that I need. But often we're not the only adult with a group of kids. And if we do forget something, we probably can ask help from somebody else. So I think there are times where it is good to be independent. It's good to get yourself prepared. You don't know who else might be able to help you. I will add a caveat that when I started camping with my kids, I realized how competent they were in ways that I hadn't known. And I was like, oh, because because I'm thinking, okay, I'm the mom, I'm taking the tent, I've got to make sure I've got this. And kind of like, my idea was they would hold a piece up while I got the other piece. And then my kids are like, what do you even do? Like they had that tent up, like nothing. I wouldn't say nothing, but so I was like, oh, they're better at this than me.
Right.
Teach them. I was just trying to figure it out myself. And so we would create a system where like, I would do something different. If we're setting up the campsite, I would have certain tasks. They would have certain tasks. But that idea that I'm going independently, I'm the adult, I've got to make sure I know how to start the fire quickly. I've got to know the tent. And then my kids were like consistently better at a lot of these things. And I'm like, okay, this is interesting, right? And so it's just, but if they hadn't been, I had gotten myself prepared. I knew how to do that, right? But so often in life, the stuff that we don't know how to do, we often don't know how to do it because A, we haven't needed to, or B, we partner with people, we might have skills that they don't have. And so like, if I look at the partnership between my husband and I, there's all kinds of stuff that, I mean, I'm sure you might have had this experience, your spouse is away and all of a sudden you're like, oh, there's like 4 things I never do apparently. And you're like, oh, I wonder where this is. I wonder where that is. And because there's just that division of labor.
Yeah.
But then there's stuff that I would do that he wouldn't be used to doing. So it's just, whether that's in a marriage or whether that's just a choice to, I don't know, contract stuff out. Some people change their own oil. Some people give business to their local mechanic. Some people have a room they want painted, so they go get paint and they paint it. Other people decide to hire somebody to paint. And so it's just like, we all have different things that some people educate their own kids.
Yeah, right.
Some people contract that out. Like seriously though.
Yeah.
Like not everybody is doing the same things. I just wanted to touch on the laundry thing too, Ashley, because like laundry, you're right. If you're not kind of consistently doing it, it's just like a bit of a lesson that you maybe had 2 years ago. But laundry is like, again, I look at my kids now and they don't do laundry the way that I do. Again, they don't fold things the way I fold it. They do laundry way more than I would ever do laundry. I'm like, why are we doing laundry again? So if I had taught them, I would have been like, this is, so we're doing it on this day or this day, or, you can wear that sweater a couple of times before you need to wash it, but they don't agree with that. So they are doing their own in an entirely different way than I would do it. And I remember visiting my, one of my sons when he was away at college, and actually I guess it was the summertime. He lived there in an apartment still, and he was working for the summer, and we were going up for coffee or something, and he was using a laundromat. And so this is the other thing, they're not going to be using, if they're away from home, they're not going to be using your washing machine. So if you've ever got a new washing machine, you have to relearn it anyway.
Yeah.
Like you're not. So I was kind of watching him at the laundromat, and I didn't know how this laundromat worked because I've never been to that laundromat.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Anyway, that was long.
No, that's good. But I think, so again, I had a lot of things pop up so I'm going to try to remember. But one was just what you were saying there too, right? Like, it's like impossible for us to know what they're going to need to know. Like, again, going back to, I feel like I'm being so critical of these lists, and I did not mean to come across that way, but it just brought up this stuff for me. But when you have this list of like top 5 things that they need to learn before they go, well, like we can't guess what they're going to need to know. Um, like there's so many different things. And like you said, they may make different choices than us on not only how to do these things, but if they're going to do these things, right? Like you said, they might, and maybe, and I'm sure some parents would listen to that and think like, yeah, but I want them to have the confidence to know that they've been shown how to do this, or they have done it once, so they have belief in themselves that they can do it again. And that's all fine. And I'm sure like that happens anyway in families. Um, but this idea that as parents, we can think of all the things our kids are going to need to know when they're older, that's impossible anyway. And even the way things are done is different. Like banking, for example, right? Like, who knows what banking's going to look like when my kids are in their 30s? Like, I'm
Oh,
sure
yeah.
very different, right? Like, so what I teach them now or show them now, that's fine, but it might look so like it might be irrelevant when they actually need it.
Mhm.
So I just as a parent don't want to be stressing about that. And I mean, if it happens, it happens. Like it's fine. But again, I just don't want to add it to my list of things to worry about and put it on that to-do list. The other thing, well, a couple other things came up for me when you were talking. The other one, and I don't think I've mentioned this yet, is and this might just be the way I interpret it. And I think it's because I hear other adults or parents or, teachers, and it comes from a good place. But this idea that we want to prepare our kids to be independent, and I get it. And there's truth in it for sure. I'm not saying that that's wrong by any means, but everyone lives different lives. So we might have kids who, live on their own and, have a small group of friends and maybe are very on their own and independent, but we all, like a lot of us, we are, I think you used the word like interdependent, right? Like it's not like once our kids move out, we disappear from their lives, or if they move out, that they don't have a close friend that they can call or a neighbor that they can ask for help. Like I'm trying to think of an actual example of my own life, but I know that when I left my home, I don't really, sure, there were times that I was by myself and I learned how to do some things on my own, but for the most part, I was with other people, whether it was roommates. Like when I first left for school, it was with roommates. Um, and then my boyfriend at the time, like I wasn't doing a lot of this stuff on my own, or my parents, right? Like I wasn't living at home anymore, but um, they'd help me with some things that I'm just thinking about like the time I guess bought my second car. I was at home with my first car, but when I bought my second car, I wasn't living at home for a while, but I still didn't go do that by myself. And maybe I could have, but I feel like that's the other thing, is remembering that ideally our kids will still be connected to us, but have other people in their lives that they don't feel like they have to learn how to do these things on their own if they don't want to. Um, and then what was the other thing? Oh, when you were talking about the camping, and realizing that your kids could do certain things and you're watching them and you're going, oh, and it's so funny when I notice my kids do certain things and I'll even say to them, I'm like, how do you know how to do that? Which they get really offended by. And I go, not that I know you're capable, but it is an interesting experience to me because I find like, and I've even tried explaining this to my kids, is like it can kind of sneak up on us as parents because we're just so busy. And, they go from being babies to needing everything from us. And as they grow, it's gradual, but it happens fast at the same time. So, and the older they get, I feel like it happens more and more where they're just doing things. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, how do they know how to do that? Like, and it's not, I'm not shocked. Like, I know they're capable, but it's just, I hadn't seen them do that before, and they're pleasant surprises. Um, but I like that because, I don't know. I think it helps us as parents anyway, just feel a little bit more reassurance, I guess, when we do have those
Mhm.
moments. Because we certainly have the other moments where they're doing certain things and you're kind of like rolling your eyes going, oh my gosh, what are they thinking right now? Those
Yeah.
happen, of course. But when they do certain things and you're just like, I didn't know that they knew how to do that. And I don't know how they figured that out, but they did. And it's like, well, they'll continue to do that. So, yeah, anyway, those are the things that popped up for me when you were talking. I think that was all of them.
Um, yeah, I was thinking about how so often we want to protect our kids from, I don't know, I guess something going wrong or embarrassment or something like that. And like there are some really good things. I mean, if I was helping my kid move into an apartment, I remember we were like looking up the smoke detector, like making, it's just stuff that makes sense, right? You walk in and you're like, is there a fire extinguisher? Is that familiar? Is that this one familiar to you? Like there's some stuff that just makes sense,
Yeah,
obviously. But I think it's more, but those things are more like safety things that are hopefully not even going to come up.
yeah,
But there's the things that I think it's more a lot of these kind of like parenting um, warnings or whatever. A lot of it is more these independence things.
hmm,
And I was thinking about an example of when I first moved away from home. And I was sharing an apartment with three friends. The first year I went to college, and I was not yet 18. I was 17 for another couple of months, which in hindsight seems so young to me, but like at the time it was normal to me. I don't know. But so something I had never done was write a check before. I had never written a check. And of course, there's an example of something that isn't even done that much anymore, right? Like banking
yeah,
has, but I did not write the check properly. I can't remember, like it was partly right, but I put something on the wrong line. I can't quite remember. Or maybe I had written a check, but not, I don't know. Anyway, because I do seem to remember I had a checking account. So I don't know why I wouldn't have written one. I guess what would I be writing checks for?
right.
Living like, right. And it was very much a cash. I mean,
Yeah,
we're going back to the very like, I don't know, like 92, 93. I don't think I had a bank card. So
right.
you were literally going to the bank and you had cash or you had checks.
Yeah.
So I remember writing my check and the property, it was like in a building, the property manager sent it back kind of miserable about it, like not terrible but kind of nasty that I hadn't written this check properly.
Hmm.
And I do remember feeling a bit of a sting from that, of just the way she responded, um and that I hadn't done it properly, right?
Yeah,
But like, okay, so I just used another check,
yeah,
right? But I think so many of these things, it's like, what is the worst thing that can happen if your kid is a little, like, maybe doesn't separate the colors when they do want, like, a lot of this stuff really isn't the end of the world. And so sometimes that little sting or that little bit of embarrassment or inconvenience, I can just think of so many things. I remember that year, I could not get the bus system straight in that city. And I remember more than once looping around and I'm like, I have no idea where I am right now.
yeah,
And like, so I would finally just say to the bus driver, so I thought I was going here, you know, and like, that is just part of life, that
yeah,
sometimes you're maybe going to get on a bus, especially again at that age. I was from a rural area. I was not used to riding on buses. So
yeah.
I didn't know. And so I guess somebody could have said, well, she's never ridden on buses before. Like, I don't know. I guess my parents could have taken me. It's not even a matter of going to the city. It would have to be that city,
Uh-huh.
because they're different everywhere you go, right?
Yeah.
But I guess we would have tried a few routes. Um, in hindsight, I can think of sometimes I've done that type of thing with my kids.
Hmm.
Not so much from a perspective of like, you absolutely need to know, like, it's not a panic. It's just like, I don't know. Sometimes there's some stuff that is, especially, I think we know our kids' personalities too,
Yeah.
right? So if you have a kid that really likes to be prepared for something,
Yeah.
it's not unreasonable to go and walk them through that. But that
Yeah.
feels different somehow than a generic checklist that says,
Hmm.
anyway, all that I'm saying about that is whatever. I got lost on the bus. I ended up deciding to walk lots of places that year because I just found the bus system really frustrating. And so be it, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's part of life. That's part of that like adventure a little bit of,
Yeah.
doing and learning through making mistakes,
Hmm.
right? Like baking something for an event and being like, oh,
Yeah.
but that's just part of life.
Yeah, I think as you're saying that, it's making me think about how people, and I'm saying how people talk about this because I'm not there yet with my oldest only being 12, but I'm thinking about, I mean, it's still true, I think, for 12-year-olds and even my 9-year-old. But it is part of life. It's part of the adventure. And I hear people talk about how teenagers, like that adolescence stage is, that's what they're craving. That's what they're looking for. Like developmentally, they are wanting to go out into the world and try to figure out. I mean, you can even see it in kids when they get to the point, like, let me do it. Let me do it. I can do this. Like, I think as we grow, we're looking for those opportunities to be trusted, to not necessarily know how to do it, but to figure out how to do it. And like, I just think about the confidence that can come along with that too. But I do, just as you were talking, I was hearing, like, from the parents' perspective, I was thinking, I understand very much so wanting to protect your kids from the not knowing and from, yeah, the embarrassment or the discomfort. And like you said, I like how you pointed out, like, kind of safety stuff aside, right? Um, but there is something about, yeah, you kind of want to protect them. And I think that a piece of it might be, so when, like, I'm picturing you like figuring out the bus system and navigating that on your own, and you learn so much about yourself through those experiences, and it's maybe not all pleasant, but it's okay. But in those experiences, that's when you start to sometimes connect with other people. Like you said, you talk to the bus driver, and you can be met with the bus driver who's helpful and friendly and happy to help you. Or you could be met with the bus driver, and I think this is less common, but these people are certainly out there, who kind of meet you with judgment. And like, I'm just thinking about how there's some adults out there who take those opportunities to say, didn't your parents ever teach you this?
Have an
So
exact.
go, yeah, share, because I think that that's probably a big thing we want to protect our kids from is, and then that doesn't feel good either if we're the parents, right? Like, we don't want our kids to go out there and someone to go, oh, of course your mom probably just always did this for you. Coming from a place of more, and that says more about that person than anyone else, and we know that. But I think more often than not, it is an experience to learn more about yourself, and you do come across people, like, for the most part, people are happy to help. And especially, I would hope, for younger people who are still, I mean, I'm in my 40s, and I still can come up against stuff that I've never done before, and so I'm new at it, and I hope I'm met with people who are, oh, I'll help you with that, or rather than judging me for not knowing, or making, yeah, me feel bad for not knowing yet, because we can't know everything. But I want to hear your examples.
Oh, no, that those are such good points about how, and I think this is the thing, we can't know everything. So even if I was a parent that was like, okay, I want to make sure, and I definitely have had moments like this, like I want to teach my kids everything. It's just not always possible. Or
Mhm.
sometimes you do, but your kid doesn't, it just doesn't take, quite
Yeah,
honestly.
it doesn't stick.
I have this memory, and it was like spring of grade 6. So I was like maybe 11, I think, 11 or 12, 11, I think. And um, it had been really rainy outside at recess. And I can, so funny how you have these visuals of things, right? So I had this like kind of light pink jacket, and it was like a spring jacket, and it was so saturated when I came in. So I'm not sure if it wasn't very waterproof, or I can't remember that piece of it. But I came in, and my teacher was a very miserable woman. And she said to my friend and I that we were dripping. Well, first she was mad because we hung up our coats and they were dripping on the floor. But like, where you're at school, like, what are you doing? We don't have a dryer handy. We don't have. So then she said, bring those coats in, and she wanted us to like wring them out in, I guess, was a sink at the back of the classroom. But you've probably seen sinks at the back of classrooms. I mean, when you have a really wet jacket, it's, I don't know. Anyway, so she wanted us to wring out the jackets in the sink before we went back and hung the jackets up. So we were trying to do that. And I think we were somewhat effective. And I remember her saying, shame on you girls. I can remember that was a big line. She would often say it to somebody every day at some point. Shame on you, Erin, and whatever the other girl's name was. Have your mothers not taught you how to properly wring out clothing? And I think it was just, that feeling of paralysis when you're not really
Oh yeah.
expecting to be asked to do something, and now the whole class is watching you and the whole thing. And so she just came marching over here. If your mothers aren't going to be bothered teaching you how to properly wring out clothing, then I guess I'll have to show you. And it did a couple of things. First of all, it embarrassed us because she was, saying things in this way. But it was funny. It planted a seed in my mind of like, should my mother have taught me how to do this? Like, I really kind of had this little bit of, not that I was like angry, but there was a little seed planted of like, and I don't think that my mother didn't. Like, I remember I had done that type of thing before, but apparently not to the degree that the teacher wanted. Yeah. But I did have this thing in my head of like, oh, our mothers haven't taught us what they were supposed to teach, right? It's just so funny. But I wanted to talk for a minute too about this idea of like, there's just no possible way to teach everything ahead of time. And the other example that came up in my mind was my youngest two had decided to go to a basketball game at like the whole other end. Like, I'm just trying to think how far of a drive it would have been. Probably an hour across like probably the busiest stretch of city highway. Maybe not Canada, but probably. Right. And so, and my son he would have been 17 or 18. He had his license, but he hadn't had it all that long. And so he hadn't done like freeway driving, especially multiple lanes of major changeovers and airports and all kinds of stuff, right? And so they kind of announced they were going to this basketball game on, I think it was like the Sunday, and this was maybe like a Thursday. And I was like, oh, are you guys taking the train? And they're like, no, we were hoping to take your car, because he didn't have his car yet. I remember I was like, oh no. Like, right? He hasn't driven on a freeway before and not across the city like that. And so we did kind of like so anyway, what I said to him, I said, and I had been meaning to do this with him, but this is what I mean. There's just only so many things that we get to. And because it wasn't something like his work route had nothing to do with that, he didn't need it yet. Yeah. It hadn't come up yet, right? So I just said to him, okay, well, that's Sunday, this is Thursday. I'm like doing some math in my head. I said, you know what, let's do a bit of driving together, and let's just see how it's feeling. I said, I really can't guarantee you that I feel this is going to be a good idea by Sunday. Mm-hmm. And so we did some driving on the Thursday, and then we did some driving on the Friday, and we did some driving on the Saturday, and I didn't feel great about it, but I felt like probably as good as I was going to feel, with your young taking off on a freeway. It was like, okay, he understands it. He knows what he's doing. So it's just like, I didn't feel great that we hadn't done that earlier, but there had been a lot of other stuff happening. And we did take a bit of a breather, like once he got his license. And we have an episode about this kind of stuff, Ashley, about parents kind of being part. It's a little bit ironic because we do have an episode about us as parents teaching our kids things rather than kind of assuming lessons so we had done a lot of that with the drive. Yeah. But I think it was like, okay, he got his license and you just want to breathe a little bit. I was tired of being in the car. And so, we just can't know all the time. And I mean, I guess if it hadn't felt comfortable for me, I would have just said, I don't feel you can safely do it. And frankly, I didn't want my car out there either. Not to make it about the car, but it was both. Yeah. It was both. And so, those are just those things that we do them as they come up, and it's not always perfect. So there's And that wasn't ideal to have to do that crash course, but it's just what we did.
Yeah, no, I actually really like that you shared that because I think that that's really helpful and really just like a good idea of what real life is actually like with our kids, right? Like, sure, ideally you would have already done that, but maybe that's another reason why these types of messages to parents kind of irk me because we are busy. Like, life is busy. So to find time to practice driving, like that's not a little thing. It's you've got, we all get to the end of our days and go, oh my gosh, I didn't get to this, or this. We already have a lot on our plates, I guess, like us and the kids too, right? Like teenagers are doing a whole bunch of different things. So then to find time to practice that driving before the need is there, it makes a lot of sense. And like you said, taking a breather after all of it and getting the license and everything, um, yeah, it ends up coming up when it's kind of needed. I know that was maybe more of a want than a need, but something he needed to learn how to do or feel comfortable in or gain experience in before he did the thing he wanted. And it didn't look perfect, but that's okay because like there's no point on looking back and going, oh, we should have done this, right? Like we're busy and it's not easy to do all the things, but it's not the end of the world, right? Like you
No.
found time. And if you didn't find time, then, like it is, I think it's tricky. So I think that's helpful for people to think about. I know it's helpful for me to think about because I think it's easy. I'm just thinking, I'll just speak for myself. Like, it's easy to put pressure on myself to do all the things and I think it's part of that messaging, like, am I doing enough? Right. And that can fall into that, right? Like, oh, I didn't do enough driving practice because we didn't cover that. And he doesn't have experience with that yet. And it's easy to like kind of take that on as something we didn't do enough of or a good enough job or whatever. And that's just not that's not the truth of it, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that doesn't help anyone if as parents we're feeling down on ourselves about things. So it's not about like figuring it out and getting it all perfect. It's just kind of realizing that we're doing what we can as it comes up. Um, but I also really like that example because that's real life. And it's a practical thing. And you guys I can't remember what episode, maybe we can link that in the show notes because people might enjoy listening to that conversation after this one because I think in that one, if I'm remembering correctly, like we did get into quite a few different like practical examples of like
Yeah.
us as parents teaching the kids and stuff. So that might be helpful to follow this one. If we can link that one. But it was I mean it's so relevant to, and I don't want to skip. So if there's more we can I don't want to move away from anything too quickly, but you can talk about it with the academic stuff as well, right? Like that's not what was really coming up for me. Um, uh, when I was thinking about today's conversation and this topic, it was more so the stuff we've talked about, like the non what I just call like the non-academic stuff, the more practical life skills, I guess. But it's so true with the academic stuff as well. I guess maybe I just have heard more of those conversations. Like people are talking about that with like the checklists of, making sure the kids are covered, like getting all the academic stuff. That's like another area of like parents can feel so much pressure and stress around making sure that by the time the one thing that comes up for me that we've maybe not talked about much on here is like essay writing. And I don't know why that one stands out to me. And we're not even there yet. Like with my two, but I know I've heard or read things around like making sure your child knows how to write an essay or how to format an essay before I don't even know, before high school, before post-secondary. That's one. I'm sure there's other examples too. Those just don't, I don't like that messaging. they just don't get to me as easily, I guess. But we could talk about it being like the academic things as well. Um, One thing around that, it doesn't have to apply to the academic, but in your one post, you wrote, and I don't remember exactly, but um, like leaving gaps and leaving space for there to be an opportunity for our kids to learn things, um, not only when they matter and when they need them, but like in their own way. And it
Mhm.
really got me thinking about how, I don't think I'd thought about it this way before. Like, I'm one to like when I learn something and it helps me, I love passing that on to other people. So I get like, I love, maybe it's the teacher in me. Like if I have learned something and I think it's really great, I want to share it with other people because, you know, in hopes that it helps other people. But when I read your blog post, it made me really think of something that I thought, I don't think I've thought of it before, where anytime I do teach my kids something, it's not to say it's bad, but it does close the door from them discovering that and learning that on their own without me having taught them. Like, I don't even know
Hmm.
what, like, it's hard to explain, but it really kind of like gave me something to think about that I hadn't thought about before that I think matters quite a bit because. And maybe and it's very helpful to relieve the pressure to teach them all the things because I don't want to say, and I know I don't think that you meant this in your blog. Like, it's not to say that teaching them something is harmful, but just that there can be space and opportunity when they're not directly taught something. And it could even be that they're taught by someone else and not us. Um, but yeah, so I don't know if we want to talk about that piece a little bit, or if you remember kind of where that idea came from, but I don't think I'd come across it before. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to try to remember that one because I think there's a lot of truth to, yeah, just that idea that even just like gaining confidence when they can figure something out on their own. We need those opportunities just as much as being taught things, right?
Yeah. Yes. And it's making me think too how interesting this is because so what the episode that I think you were referring to, and I mentioned it as well, and it had a lot to do with our kids learning to drive, our kids learning to swim,
Mhm.
skate, stuff like that, right?
Mhm.
Like I can't remember what we called it, but like non-academic skills.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, those but things that are still deemed important, especially I mean different cultures will place different importance on things, but and I it's interesting to me because remember at that time the swimming thing, I think it was you, Haley, and I, and we all had swimming examples.
Yeah.
I think we all had swimming examples. And then um so it's funny because that whole episode is actually about it could almost seem like it's opposite to what we're talking about today, but I don't
Yeah.
think so. Because it was about parents being those like mentors and teachers, rather than assuming that we have to kind of put everything externally, as far as that everything doesn't have to be a lesson that you pay for, basically, right?
Mhm.
And then we recently did an episode with, sorry, it wasn't with Esther Jones, but it was based on her essay about how there can be a value of teaching in self-directed education. So I feel like, I think I like, that's what I like so much about these conversations, Ashley, is that it's like so nuanced. So it's both, right? There can be a role for us to pass on information,
Yeah.
and there can be a really rich time for us to like teach our child a skill or show them something that we know. But I think what you're referring to is this like global idea that there are these certain things that we have to pass on. Whereas when we're teaching our kids or we're showing them something in the way we've talked about it in those two episodes, it's because it's meeting either a need or a wish in like the natural context of life.
Yeah.
Right. So I just wanted to kind of say that. And so your idea, I remember this coming up with you and Haley when we were talking about it, it was that episode, I think, when we talked a lot about swimming and driving cars and stuff like that. And it's that idea that we assign an age, like you're this age, you should learn to drive. You're this age, you should learn to swim. And often we attach like safety to it or necessity or whatever. But as you're saying, if we can possibly wait until our kid actually shows readiness, and they may not verbalize it, um, although often they do, it might just be that something comes up and they're like, oh, I mean, this happened with my one son with swimming. There were social opportunities that he wanted to be able to swim with his friends. But it took that level of importance. I mean, he was, I think, 11. And a lot of people would be like, oh my goodness, kids need to be. And it's not that I didn't try. I mean, we exposed him to water. We were around the pool all the time. My younger kids were swimming. Like, it's not like we were denying access to water. But you really can't. It's people's readiness develops when it does, either naturally or in response to something that's happening, right? And so I think what you're saying, which I agree with so much, is such a gift when we can actually see that happen when it actually makes sense for the kid. But what that has looked like for me is kids either wanting to do things earlier than I was prepared for or later than I'm comfortable with. It's usually not like schools offering driver's ed in grade 10. So, and there's space in October. So my kid's now ready. That's not usually how actual readiness works. So, I mean, I can see people saying, okay, well, that's nice and everything, but sometimes you only have so much time, or sometimes you want to do driver's ed, or there's swimming lessons are happening and you don't want to drive a bunch of different kids a bunch of different times. I get that. I'm not saying that we don't sometimes like circumvent, like we are sometimes the deciders of when our kids do things, or at least introduced. But I think what you're saying is, if it's possible, if we can kind of really ask ourselves, is it necessary in this moment that they learn this skill? And when we see them develop it on that need on their own, and then the skill on their own, it is such a cool thing. And I don't think very many people probably know what we're talking about, because culture doesn't operate this way, right? No. You put your kid in school and the curriculum and the standards decide when your kid is introduced to letters. And then there's like kind of parent peer pressure of when your kid learns to ride a bike, even things like toilet training, right? Even the term toilet training.
Yeah.
Like, so my kids they just became interested in using the toilet. I never trained them to use the toilet. But some people would look at me like, what?
Yeah.
They can't, that idea of waiting that extra 6 months or a year is too painful. Either socially or just their patience.
Yeah.
Actually find out when their kid would. And it's not even exactly like that. You kind of notice it, so you offer the opportunity. It's not totally hands-off either.
Right.
But you're working with your child with their readiness. And it's just, so I don't know if that's kind of what you're getting at, but it is such an amazing thing to see a kid decide and be ready to do something. And we just, in our culture, don't even know what that looks like.
No, I love this. Okay, so I looked it up while you were talking, and I think the episode we're referring to, because I feel like people listening will be interested, and we can link it anyway. I think it's episode 25, so it was a while ago. Self-directed learning beyond academics.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure. I was trying to read, but wanted to really listen to what you were saying. So I think, so we'll link it, but it is it's really connected. And that is definitely what I was talking about. And I'm glad you pointed out that some people probably are like, what are you talking about? Because I kind of forget about that sometimes. And I need that reminder that, the way we think and do things is different than a lot of people. I'm going to actually go back and listen to that episode for myself, because just as you were talking about the swimming, my 9-year-old, almost 10-year-old, same thing, has been taken to the pool, lots of exposure to water, was signed up and did some private swim lessons, like years ago. But I don't know, he was so young and he was timid, and I don't really know that I could even count them that he did lessons. Um, my older one picked up, just kind of naturally figured out swimming pretty quickly. It was just their thing. Not so much for my almost 10-year-old. And recently, I'll have to go back and listen to our episode because he, I think, kind of socially like swimming with friends, but just feeling himself like he's at the age where he should be a swimmer or a stronger swimmer. But it's interesting because he very much has verbalized that he wants us to take him swimming, and he wants us to take him swimming more than I feel like we realistically can take him swimming. And so I'm saying, are we interested in lessons? And he's going, no. And I'm going, okay, how can we figure this out? So it is, as these things come up, we figure it out, but it feels already so good that it's not me pushing him from, this fear-based, you must learn how to swim now. And it is actually becoming more true too. Like, and so he's the one saying, I want to become a stronger swimmer. I want to work on this. He has an opportunity where he might be around water and even swimming without us in the kind of near future potentially. So now it has become a little bit more of a different situation. Um, I'm trying to think because other things popped up while you were talking about that, because it's that almost not like beating them to it, right? Like trying to get ahead of it and be like, well, let's teach them this and let's cover this and let's get them, because I can understand where parents are coming from. Like, let's give them a head start, right? And that comes back to that messaging that you saw around school readiness and like, wanting your kid to start kindergarten, like knowing all their letters and knowing all their letter sounds, thinking like, well, it gives them a head start. It's going to make it easier for them. I can see how, where that comes from. But then there's just that missed opportunity for the kids to get to a space where they're like, I'm wanting this, I'm interested in this, I'm ready for this. And even like to go further than that, I wish I could think of a specific example because it's happened. I have shared examples. I think it's been a while on here where my kids have learned things on their own. I mean, maybe this is a simple one. One was telling time. My oldest one learned how to tell time and do the whole clock thing completely on their own, completely out of interest. And just the way their brain works, that kind of, it made sense to them early on. The other one is a non-academic one that I can talk about just quickly with both kids. And it was just so cool to see. And it was cartwheels, like learning how to do cartwheels. And my oldest, who's always the mover and everything, I think I've shared on here, like went through a phase where like cartwheels throughout the day, like cartwheels nonstop, like in the house. They were small enough still, they could do cartwheels in the house. Cartwheel, like I remember one time we were in the store and we were walking, it was cartwheel. I was like, oh, we probably shouldn't do cartwheels in the store. I don't know if that would be, maybe we should just but it was just part of their, and then one day that kind of just stopped. So learned how to do cartwheels on their own because they were just wanting to do cartwheels. And my youngest, I remember, I don't know if it was last year or the year before. I know it was warm. We were outside and he was like, I want to know how to do a cartwheel. And my older one was like, oh, I can show you how to do a cartwheel. But it actually, that had been a few years had gone by and they weren't doing cartwheels all the time anymore. So that was a little moment of like, oh, I used to be like really good at these and find them really easy, but now I need to almost remember how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And my younger one, it didn't come naturally. Like it was, he figured it out. Like he could do a cartwheel, but he was like, oh, this is hard. And he had to keep working at it. So it looked very different, but it was just like, it came from a place of them wanting to do it and either figuring it out completely on their own or saying, hey, this is something I want to know how to do. Kind of like, can you help me? And it's just so much more enjoyable. And I mean, that's a simple, easy example because, you can go your whole life not knowing how to do a cartwheel and that's fine. Maybe riding a bike would be a better example, but I have one kiddo who got on a bike very, very early. And again, that was very easy for them. And another kiddo who is still like, I don't ever want to learn how to ride a bike. And I'm like, actually, maybe that's a good example to give because that one doesn't sit real easy with me. I'm just like, what do you mean you don't want to learn how to ever ride a bike? And I keep waiting because I remember years ago saying, well, like a couple years ago saying, like, don't you want to be able to like hop on a bike and go off with your friends when they're on their bikes? Because that's what I remember from my childhood. We were on our bikes all the time, mostly with my sisters, but also with some friends, especially once we got older. So in my mind, I'm thinking like, well, you're going to want to know how to ride a bike. So this is the almost 10-year-old, still not very interested, still not interested at all in a bike, and
Mhm.
has not had, I mean, there are some, I don't want to say there's not kids riding bikes in the neighborhood, but it just doesn't seem to be as common anymore. And he certainly hasn't, I think there was one or two times we met with our group of friends that we kind of usually go on hikes with. But this path that we were meeting at, I think it was twice. There were two different paths where it was paved. So the person organizing said for kids, you know, if the kids want to bring their bikes or their scooters, and a bunch of the kids did that. And I thought my kiddo would bring their scooter, but he even said, nope, I don't want to do that. I'll just walk. And I said, well, like, do you want to bring it just in case? Like, what if you're the only one walking? Like, do you want to bring it for an option? He said, nope. And I think he was the only kid walking and was totally fine with it. And he just kind of ran alongside. And so, you know, here I am like thinking like, you're going to want to know how to ride a bike. And maybe he will still at some point, but so far he's been totally fine. And that's one where I'm a little bit like, oh, but that's a me thing, right? Like he's still so fine with it. And hopefully, you know, if he gets to the point where he wants to get on a bike and go, that he will feel comfortable still doing that. Um, but yeah, I rambled off on that example, but that one just kind of came off the top of my head.
Yeah, no, I have a close relative who who didn't learn to ride a bike. And like you're saying, I think it was a little bit difficult for the parent because it was like, well, it I think the other thing we have are these like nostalgic, like a rite of passage, right? Of
Yeah.
kids out riding their bikes, especially if we grew up in, you know, the 70s or 80s or 90s. It's like, oh, but
Yeah.
you know, that isn't yeah, I don't know. Like what, like it seems like a strange thing also to force your, like that's what this kid's parents were saying. They're like, okay, but what do you force your kid to learn? Because you can't, I mean, it's a balance thing. Like you can't force a kid to learn to ride a bike.
Yeah.
And then it kind of comes to that question sometimes when we realize we can't control something, it actually gives us that little nudge to go, well, okay, so what if they didn't learn to ride a bike?
Yeah.
Right? Like, what if they didn't? Um, yeah. So,
Well, and quick, just one more thing, if I can add to that, that's maybe helpful that I forgot about for a second as I was explaining that. Another thing, like what you were saying, right? Like, well, what do you do? Force them to learn? And there have been times where I'm like, I'm pulling the bike out. Can you just like come, let's just sit on it, right? Like, kind of forcing it, like, not totally, but really strongly being like, come
yeah.
on. Um, And since then, we have actually learned that he has some stuff going on with not with his vision, but with his eyes and how his eyes work together and how that can be connected to balance. And he has balance, but he's nervous about his balance. So since then, with the bike riding, I have made kind of that connection that potentially it's not, you know, like I could easily just be like, oh, he's just resistant and reluctant to learn how to ride a bike. But there's probably a reason behind it. And I don't know if it's connected to this. It would make sense that he is experiencing. So, like, basically, when he sits on a bike and tries to balance, I know what that's like for me. That might not be what he experiences. So I don't know. It's almost just like another reason to I guess like not force your kids, right? And
Mhm.
to trust that like, and it's fine if it's just that he doesn't want to too, but sometimes there's even more of a reason that like makes it difficult for them or something. And that could be true in lots of different examples. So I just wanted to mention that.
No, I like that. And there's some some similarity to the example I was giving to you as well, just around, I think, like some low muscle tone, some vision stuff. So yeah, we have these like nostalgic ideas, or sometimes there's safety ideas or whatever, but it's just that idea that you can't, sometimes things just are what they are. And
Hmm.
yeah. And then Ashley, I kind of, you had started moving in the direction of kind of thinking more about, like, I guess, like academic-y or even cultural things that we introduce to our kids. And then I sort of moved back, I think, a little bit. So I'll just kind of go back to what you had started that train of thought. And yeah, so that blog post that you were referring to, I remember writing that because one of my kids had ordered a microscope. No, not a microscope.
Oh, a telescope.
Microscopes we have, yes. It was a telescope. And just like seeing how much he enjoyed it, how much he kind of already knew about it. And I just had this moment where I was like, that's so weird. Why didn't we ever get him a telescope? Like, of course, you see somebody with something and you're like, that's so them, of course, And I was like, why didn't we ever think about getting a telescope? And it just was interesting to look at the things that my kids are either purchasing for themselves or trying out for the first time or doing that they didn't do with us or that we didn't introduce them to. And it just kind of being at peace with, well, yeah, like that's okay. We can't, just like the life skills stuff, it's the same with their interests or learning different things. Like we can't possibly think of all the different things. And I think about this sometimes, like travel is an interesting one that I think it really gets held up on a pedestal as well. Like this, like traveling and exposing your kids to different places. And we did some travel, but not the amount that probably one of my kids has been interested in doing. But there's no resentment around it. He just doesn't now.
Yeah.
And he's really, I mean, traveling, there's skills involved with traveling. And it's like, no, he would have learned some of those because we did do some travel, right? So he would have, but there was no, I wasn't like, okay, this is how you do this. This is how you do that. He would have picked up some of that from some of the travel we did. But a lot of this stuff is just specific to the things he's done since. And there's an example where he's miles ahead of me on stuff. Like we went away, just my sister and I and my niece and my daughter and one of my sons, just for a few days in the summertime. And like my sister said to me, she goes, he is such a comfortable, because it just it wasn't like we weren't able to do the things. He just had an ease with stuff. Like there was a question at the hotel and he's like, oh, let me just, like, he just got it figured out. And like, just so quick with locations and Ubers. And like, he just, again, stuff that we knew how to do, but so I didn't teach him any of that. He's just picked that up. And part of it's just him. That's the other thing. It's not always about who teaches the kid. Sometimes kids are just innately, maybe like your one kid with the cartwheel. It maybe just came easier, and so it's not about like who teaches them. But it made me think about how, and I was thinking about it earlier in the conversation about the whole highway driving or like the freeway driving thing. How, technically speaking, if I hadn't done any practicing with him, like I wouldn't have felt comfortable about that. But he did have his license. He was legally allowed to be on the road. It's funny how this idea of like parenting has become so all encompassing. And so in decades past, like you got your license and you drove. And I don't even think there were, like, just talking to past relatives and stuff, there weren't even all these driving schools. So I think it's two things. I don't think there was as many lessons, but I also don't think parents were spending as much time. I mean, probably, yes, you would have gotten in the car with somebody before you went to try your license. But this idea that we have to like I'm comfortable doing kind of a lot of active parenting, but it's funny what a huge expectation parenting is now. Like Fran Lipitori has done some interesting writing. I would have to dig it up, but like on that difference between being a parent and parent.
Mm,
And it's like people just used to be parents. They had kids, like
yeah.
just kids. And they were, yeah, they made sure the kids had food, and hopefully, often maybe people weren't, but hopefully they were kind to kids. Um, I don't mean that there was no sort of what we would turn into a verb as parenting, but parenting as a verb has become really all encompassing at this point, where we are now, I'm saying supposed to, I mean, whatever, but you know what I mean? There's kind of some degree of expectation around like so much knowledge around like food and nutrition and all the things like the swimming and the bike riding
Yeah.
and the skating and, music lessons. Like
Yeah.
it is just huge. And kids were they never had exposure to all those different things. They might have had exposure. I mean, I can think of like my dad and my grandpa's talking about like playing hockey on the pond. They weren't taking skating lessons. This was a bunch of kids out on their skates with makeshift shin pads playing hockey. And now hockey is like, it is a whole thing. It is a
Yeah.
whole thing here in Canada. It's thousands of dollars. It's parents up at 5 a.m. My dad's parents would never have got up at 5 a.m. for him to play hockey. If he wanted to play hockey, he found some buddies and they went out to a pond.
Yeah.
And I'm of two minds about it, because I do think it is nice to take our role as parents seriously.
Mhm.
But as you kind of, your inspiration for thinking about this topic, Ashley, just to acknowledge like it is an enormous amount of pressure.
Mhm.
Um, so
Yeah.
I guess what I'm saying is, if I had just said, ooh, I don't know how I feel about you driving, but I hadn't had time to do that highway driving. Like I shudder to think about that, because it's like I just would never do that. But that's what would have happened. Like I wouldn't have been doing anything illegal, I guess is what I,
Mhm.
right? He had his license. He could
Yeah.
have gone. He
Yeah.
could have gone, and hopefully it would have been fine.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
if it wasn't fine, it wouldn't be blamed on me as a parent. It
Right.
would be his driving skills
Yeah.
or somebody else's who maybe hit him.
Yeah.
Nobody would be going, oh wow, that mom didn't spend
Yeah.
14 consecutive nights driving kilometer after kilometer to make sure her son was safe, even though he already has license. Like,
Right.
right?
It's such a shift.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I am aware of time. I'm noticing the time. This has gone by fast like it always does for us, but I had a couple thoughts for sure. Just with what you were saying there. One, which I'm very interested in this. Just when you were talking about your dad, like the idea of going out and just playing hockey. I even think my husband, he went out and played. I'm sure there's still kids that do this, but like road hockey all the time. So a little bit different because but same thing. It would just be a group of kids that would get together and they would do that all the time. And it was just that. It was just a group of kids. And I think about this a lot, and maybe I don't know if it's a conversation, like a whole episode later on, but this idea around this shift from kids going out and organizing themselves into whatever it is that they do, hockey or whatever, to now kids getting all signed up for the structured activities that adults run. Like, I'm very interested and curious about those changes and kind of like the pros and cons, because I'm sure there's, good things and not so good things about both. But there has been a real change. And maybe one of the reasons I'm super interested in it is because my kids are not real into the whole structured activity thing. But when we go out and they're looking for the other kids, all the other kids are in their structured activities. They're not out there. I mean, I think I've probably talked about this on the podcast. Like, we live right across from the park. And you would think, like, it amazes me. Like, it is a beautiful park. And you would think I could just send the kids across the road and they just play with all the neighborhood kids, but they're not there. Like, it still boggles my mind. And it's been years. I should just be used to it. Um, but yeah, this idea that like the parents are so involved, and other adults are, so involved, whether it's like volunteer coaching or whatnot. And there are some, I'm sure, really good things that come from that. But I think we're missing some stuff that kids used to have when it wasn't all like that. Um, oh, and then I guess the other thing that came up for me, especially as you were talking about like the whole shift from just like being a parent to parenting, it being more of a verb. And I had thought about this in kind of thinking about our conversation today too. When I saw like that Instagram post, or I see things like that where it says like top 5 things to cover with your kids or to teach your kids before they move out, it kind of makes it, to me, the way I interpreted that is like this idea that like your kids are your project and that you have a deadline, right? Like this idea that um, here's all the things you need to do to make this human as good as possible and as knowledgeable and as capable as possible before they turn 18. And I'm obviously being silly with that, but um, I just I just don't see it like that at all. Where yeah, that it's I don't know, that's just so opposite from like just doing life together and being in relationship and all the things we talk about and in connection. Um yeah, like it's of course we want to teach our kids things that we think that they want to know and that will be helpful at times. And of course we want to pass things on to them. So it's not about never doing things like that. But I think it's just this reminder that they have their whole lives to learn. Um, and and once they turn 18 or move out, whatever it looks like, um, it doesn't mean that like, I don't know, like our job is done. Do you know what I mean? Like we're
Yeah.
still we're still there. It's not like, and I guess it's just there's that pressure when it's worded that way. To do these things, make sure you cover these things before they're gone. And I'm just like, gone where? Like
Yeah.
we're still going to be around and we still have a relationship with them that, if they need help and they're not asking someone else for it or doing it on their own, they can come to us. Um, I had a couple other ideas when you were talking, um, but I've kind of lost them. But I know one was around the idea, and I don't know what you said that made me think of it. But anyway, it was just around the idea of like different personalities,
Mm.
and how that really plays a role too, and how, um, yeah, like everyone kind of knows their kids the best. So we can kind of, I don't think it hurts. I mean, I certainly want to be intentional. It's not like I never want to think about these things, but I think we really can like kind of zero in on our own kids and say, okay, like what would be, when they don't come, because lots, like you said, lots of times they do come and they ask us and they just let us know what it is they're needing right now. But sometimes it's through observation and we just notice that something might be helpful. And that's when I think we can come in and maybe offer something and then see, whether they're interested or whether maybe now's not the right time and we wait. But we do that based on like our kids and their personalities and their interests, of course, but their needs at the time and just how they seem to be doing day to day. So I think, yeah, you can't really go off, I guess, someone else's checklist. You need to kind of just pay attention to your own kids and the situation they're in and just see what comes up. I don't know. I feel like I'm being too vague, but I don't want to give specific examples because I guess I'm just trying to make the point that parents can hopefully trust themselves to notice when their kids might be needing something. And then that's when, it might be helpful to show them how to do something
Yeah.
or, whatever it might be. Does that make sense?
It does. No,
Okay.
and I think it's such a good point. And I'm aware of our time too. And I think that I guess the thing that's kind of coming to mind too, Ashley, as you're talking, and it came up earlier, and I was just kind of trying to think of what I wanted to say. but just thinking about it from our kids' perspective too, or any child's perspective. I think when you were talking about the park, for example, I was thinking about how so often now I see like pretty young kids in public spaces with tutors, for example. So it might be like a reading tutor. I'm not joking, like 5 or 6 year olds with a tutor.
Mm-hmm.
And I know people who I really like and respect who have their kids going to tutors at that age. And I get it because they love their kid and the school is telling them that something's not clicking with reading. Their kid is falling behind with reading. And I can feel in people's voices like the panic for their kids, right? Because, and we kind of know that some of that is true in the way that the school system is set up. So it's not even to be coming down on these parents, but it's just like, oh, just this whole kind of system and culture set up on not getting behind. And you had said earlier, like this head start, and this. And so there was this one day, this was like quite a few years ago now, probably 5 or 6 years ago at least. And once again, I was at a library, or maybe it was a community center. I was waiting for my kids. They were doing something with friends. And so I was waiting. And behind me was a tutor and a really little kid. I want to say like maybe 5. And they were working on, sounds and words, and the kid didn't want to be there. And it was after like a full day of school. It was probably like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 4:30 in the afternoon. And so I just remember sitting there and the interactions were so like, so the tutor is trying to get the kid to do stuff. The kid is resisting, but the tutor, it became so apparent to me, wants to make it look a certain way to the parent, because of course the parent is paying the tutor, and ultimately the parent is worried about the kid. So there's all this stuff going on. So I was listening to all this like not great stuff happening between the tutor and the kid, not horrific, but like highly manipulating, a lot of bribery. It was just not a great scenario. A lot of frustration with the kid because the kid wouldn't sit and do the work. And so the tutor's frustrated, and there's a lot of kind of like kind of hidden sarcasm. And then the kid would do something the tutor wanted, and there was this great, that's excellent. I knew you would meet this school for today. Like it was very whatever. And then the parents showed up and to pick the child up, and listening to the way that the tutor relayed the information, which was very different from what I had just experienced, because they had to, and it was like, oh yeah, they, blah, 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 and this kind of sing-songy voice. I was just like, this is such a production when a child has already had a full day of school, and then they're being like rewarded and bribed and semi-punished for not doing what the tutor wants, and the parent is forking over this money, and the parent's probably rushing from work to get this 5 or 6-year-old to a tutoring session.
Yeah.
Like, I guess I'm going back to what you're talking about, this pressure. Like, what does that do to kids on some level to constantly be evaluated, pushed? You hear these 2 adults talking about whether you did what you were supposed to be doing. But it's all back again to this fear of like getting certain things, certain skills in by a certain age, right? Like, sorry, my held up pretty well, but I'm losing it now. But that was just the last thing I wanted to say. Again, it's like, these are the things we have to check the boxes off by the time this kid is 6 or else, right?
Yeah. I think that that's such a good example that I think so many parents can either like relate to or just understand, because I mean, and that one gets to me like a lot of ones, but I feel like the reading one when the kids are in school, and even for the kids who are not in school, because there's, not to say reading's not important and learning to read isn't important, but there's just such a strong idea in our society that kids have to be learning to read by such a young age. And like you said, there is some truth to it when the kids are in school. And like it can be really difficult if their reading skills are developing later because of the way the school system's designed. That's why I find it so frustrating because, like you said, what does this do to the kid? And what does it do even like to the kid and the parent relationship? Because now this kid feels like maybe they're not trying hard enough or not doing, as well as they should be. And the parents are, you know, just wanting what's best for their kids and or their kid and they're stressed. Like it just and I just look at those situations and I think none of that's necessary. Like what a shame. Um and that's simplifying it. I do realize that. But yeah, it's a good example because it's reading and that's just so many people can relate to it. But you could use it with a lot of like toilet training. You said earlier, like kids learning to, moving them out of diapers or whatever to using the toilet. And it's such a thing. Or sleeping through the night without the parents. Like there's so many things where that pressure is on the parents and yeah, you see so many, even going back to like parenting being a verb, like all the books that you see out there about how to toilet train your kids and how to get your kids school ready. Like there's so much pushed on parents. And like you said, decades ago, it wasn't like that, or at least not to this degree. Um,
I
so
grew up with almost, I don't remember anybody ever that I know in the primary grades who had a tutor. Nobody.
right.
Nobody. I remember I actually had some tutoring for one of my subjects in like my senior year of high school.
Mm-hmm.
It was like specific to, like it was something people did sometimes in a high school course or
Yeah.
maybe higher elementary.
Yeah.
But there were definitely not people in my era or in my community paying for a tutor for their
Mm-hmm.
5.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes me wonder, Ashley, my throat seemed to revive for me for this last point, but it makes me think about how much we talk about, like there's so much in the media too about like the teen mental health crisis, the teen mental
Mm-hmm.
health crisis. And what I notice is that people are always looking at teen issues. So is it the social media? Is it the gaming? Is it the materialism and peer pressure? Is it is it the news, all the things that are happening in the world? And I'm not saying that, I mean, it could be any number of things for so many kids, but I'm always like, but what has been accumulating to this age? Like, we talk about kids and mental health always like there's some kind of an external thing that we're going to blame for it. And I'm not saying that there aren't pieces of all those things, but I'm just saying, like, if you think about what it does to the psyche over time,
Mm-hmm.
to be pushed into toilet training, pushed into reading, pushed into swimming, pushed
Mm-hmm.
into being away from your parents before you're ready. Like,
It's a lot.
over time, what does that accumulate? To me, it involves anxiety over time.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, like it just feels like so much.
Yeah. No, I think now I want to have a whole conversation about that.
Yeah,
Maybe another episode because I think that
yeah.
yeah, it just I think I mean it's so it just really kind of like gets to the root of it, I think,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we have to it would be nice to see everybody just like kind of take a pause and really look at that and ask those questions because I think it answers so much. I don't predict that that will happen, in the big picture, because oh my gosh, like what would that look like? But yeah, I think anytime we can, I don't know, like how do I put this? I guess I just don't find it very helpful or helpful at all if not extra, just pressure and stress is added to parents in any of these ways. Yeah, wanting to just encourage parents to, and myself, remember that we've been like doing this for a long time, right? Like there've been the parents and children figuring out the ways that all these things will happen. And I'm not saying checklists can't be helpful at times. And, some of these things are um, useful, but not when it's done from a place of fear, of worrying about, oh my gosh, what's going to happen if my kid can't do this by this age? Like, it's not I can't think of another word. It's just not helpful. Um,
Mm-hmm.
like it's not a helpful starting point, like place to come from when we're trying to um, like raise our kids. Like we are still, wanting to teach them different things. And I keep saying that, like it's not about not teaching them different things and helping them figure out how to do things and work on their skills and all of that, but it's just coming from a different place when it's fear-based and worried about, oh my gosh, like, yeah, I just don't think that that's a helpful place to start from. So,
No, and it's not helpful if parents are feeling that level of pressure. It's not going to be helpful in the way that they interact with their kids either. I know when I'm under pressure from somebody or something, whether it's like external or even just self-imposed, but usually it's self-imposed because of an external factor, right? Like
mhm,
I'm not at my best with my family when I am feeling like I'm not doing something well enough and and it involves them. I need to
mhm,
get something moving in some way with my family. It's not great for our relationship
yeah,
um, at all. So I think it's a good point, Ashley. Just like we've talked about this so much from the perspective of like child development, but just you keep making such a good point around as parents, just like the impact that it has on parents. But
mhm.
affects the kids anyway, but also just affects the parent too. Like
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, it's a
all,
lot. It's
all
a
of
lot, and I think it's helpful to acknowledge it and just be aware of it, I guess. And maybe we didn't go into this a lot. We don't need to now because of time, but when we're feeling that pressure and stress, and sometimes it's just you read something like that and you just feel it for the day, but sometimes it sticks with you longer. um our kids pick up on that, and some kids, you know I'm thinking about my one kid in particular already worries about this type of stuff, like, will I know how to do all the things when I need to know it, which is so interesting because he's never been to school. So if I then come, show up with this pressure, even if I think I don't seem stressed when I'm with him, when I'm talking about it with him, I'm pretty sure he'd pick up on it. And that would just add to his worries about, am I going to like be able to learn, not am I going to be able to learn how to do it, but just like, will I know how to do the things I need to know how to do it when I need to know? Um, and I just, again, that's not going to be helpful for anyone. And it's not necessary. So I just think if we can, I know myself, take the time to really think about, like, think it all through, it just, my comfort level really grows and my stress goes down, and then I can show up and be around the kids and talk about these different things and just feel comfortable. And then I think like that sets the tone, right? And again, some kids are more sensitive to it than others. My other kiddo probably wouldn't not not that they wouldn't pick up on it, but they just wouldn't take it on, whereas my other kid really would. Like, it surprises me how much. So I have to be mindful of that too. So yeah. Well,
it's
thank
lots to think about.
you.
But yeah,
Yeah, and I
good.
appreciate having the opportunity to kind of talk all of it through, especially when it's like something that popped up for me recently. So that's helpful.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought it up because yeah, I'd been thinking a little bit of it, but this just kind of broadened it. And yeah, I found it really interesting. So, all right. Well, thank you, Ashley. And I guess just quickly, because we often forget to say this, um, but yeah, anytime that anybody is interested or able to leave a review or a rating, we would love that. That would be fantastic. And yeah, just good to see you, Ashley. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks so much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And this ends our conversation today. We hope you found it interesting and maybe helpful. If you'd like to connect further or see additional content, Haley can be found on the web and on Instagram at Taking a Kinder Path. Erin can be found at Everlearning. And I, Ashley, can be found on Instagram at AshleyAsMama and at Storytime Shelves. We'd be very grateful if you'd share this conversation with anyone you think might appreciate it. Thank you for your time today.